Hi Mage fans, Puka here. Today's episode is a memorial one dedicated to Terry Robinson, divided into 3 parts. First up is a host's roundtable featuring Adam, Bryce, Charles, Josh, and myself, where we sat down to reminisce about our friend and co-host. After that is a series of audio tributes recorded and sent in by listeners in the wake of Terry's passing. Finally, our producer Joseph shares his own tribute and reads out some of the written messages that were received on our website. You might be wondering why it took so long for this episode to be released, since the various pieces have been floating around for some months waiting to be assembled. The truth is that I volunteered to edit it, but actually doing that was one of the toughest emotional challenges I faced. For quite a while, I couldn't even bring myself to start. Time doesn't necessarily heal all wounds, but it can make them easier to endure, and so having had a while to process a lot of my own feelings, I'm relieved that I was able to finally get this one into reasonable enough shape for you. I want to personally apologize for that delay, and I'm grateful for your implicit patience. Do check out the show notes to this episode for the link to our Discord community if you want to keep the conversation going. We'll also provide a PDF of the Book of Tributes, a collection of condolences from the Discord collated and provided for the memorial service back in January. Hopefully, all of this shows in as heartfelt a light as possible that Terry remains a guiding force for all of us, continuing to encourage us to go change reality. May you find some comfort from that, may you mage strong, and otherwise, here now are some words of mad love and respect for this guy Terry Robinson.
Welcome to Mage the Podcast. I am your host, Josh Heath, and I am joined by a roundtable of Mage the Podcast hosts to do something that we hope is not necessarily depressing or sad, but we wanted to talk about the life and engagement, life and times of Terry Robinson and his impact on us as members of the Mage the Podcast community, as gamers, as friends. And so we've got a small group of folks together just to talk about him, and we hope that folks in the community enjoy our celebration of him and our relationship with him in the Mage the Podcast space, in the Mage space, in the gaming space. I could babble about the spaces all day long, but that requires a lot of correspondence. So we're going to go through, and everyone's going to say a thing, but I'm joined by Adam Simpson, Charles Siegel, Puka, and Bryce, our various hosts from the various parts of the Mage the Podcast community. And Puka's going to hate me for all of the stumbling that I've been doing. It's going to make editing this exciting. But I want to say first that we're really excited to be together talking about anything. But talking about Terry is going to be hopefully a good time. And we know that his energy would want that to be a positive thing. So we hope people, listening, hearing the great things that we say about him know that we do so with deep love and respect and admiration. So I'm going to kick it over to Adam. And Adam, take it away, kind of give your thoughts on some of the impacts that Terry has had on you in your life.
Well, thank you. Hello, everyone. This is Adam, and the impact Terry has had on my life is very great. He was a friend. He was a frequent contributor. He was a great encouragement to me. There were a lot of episodes that are a part of Mage the Podcast because I was chatting with Terry and I mentioned some idea and Terry said, do it. And then he would contact me later and said, no, I wasn't kidding, Adam, do it. And a lot of times I would say, yeah, I was just spitballing. I don't know if I can handle this one. And Terry said, no, you can handle it. Go ahead and do it. And that is how we got a number of episodes, many of which Terry was a part of. And it was so much fun to record with him. As we were preparing for this special broadcast, we were trying to decide there's so many things we could say about Terry. Where does one start? And Puka said, I will help. I will put out 4 questions that each of us can consider, and that will help us to collect our thoughts. And I'm so appreciative to Puka for doing that. The first idea was, what impact did I see Terry having on the gaming community? Terry taught us it's more fun together. Terry built the Mage community that we know today. He started that by asking if he could join my Tomes of Magic series for the podcast. I was doing it on my own, and when he asked to join, I was actually intimidated. I told him we didn't really know each other. We might disagree. How would we coordinate? Terry told me it's fine to disagree. We'd get to know each other. He said, Adam, it's more fun together. I was persuaded and took a chance. After a few episodes, we had a sense of timing and we were enjoying it. From there, he started the Discord server while reaching out to many people. He established relationships while giving us a place to follow that example. Now we have a large mage community where we can share ideas, collaborate, and it is more fun together. What we have learned from Terry? Well, in the beginning, Terry taught me about microphones, audio editing software, and online scheduling tools. He told me there are countless podcasts, but only some have polish. Polish is editing, preparing for a recording, things like that. After that, Terry taught me confidence. He had a way of showing a positive attitude in every situation. He disagreed with people in a friendly way. No matter what happened, it was okay. Don't push people too far, and when they show they're upset, don't worry, they'll be fine later. Things will resume. A lot of us in the mage community are introverts. We can benefit from kind words and the idea that when we come back later, it's going to be okay. That confidence is what I'm relying on now. Something about Terry that listeners might not know. Well, I don't know if Terry shared this or not, but many times he told me in great detail about the solar panel array he built on the roof of his house. He talked about the components, organizing the system, fiddling with the interface, and all the statistics it reported. It may have started with energy conservation, but it soon grew into a Sons of Ether mad science project that delighted him. We should all find a project that absorbs us as much as Terry's solar panels. The way we're carrying his memory forward. After influential people leave us, there are usually a crowd of people claiming to know what that person wanted, and they all disagree. With Terry, it's simple. We really do know what he wanted. He wanted us to keep recording episodes, keep finding mage fans to chat with, keep making fan projects. Terry wanted us to keep our mage community growing and busy. When Terry was with us, he was like a locomotive. He was so active and creative. Now I'm recording more episodes, talking to more people online, getting involved with planning future projects. None of us can take Terry's place, and I'm confident if Terry could visit for 5 minutes more, he would look each of us in the eye, he would pause and say, yes, that's the point. You aren't supposed to find one person to replace me. You're supposed to all offer something. Everyone in the pool, they used to shout at parties when I was a teenager. Terry left a space so large after his passing that the only way to adjust is if we all talk, all make something, all participate. We have to all get in there and offer something. Otherwise, the empty space is too big. It would dishearten all of us. Those are my thoughts, and I would like to hand off the microphone to Charles.
Hi, I can't bring myself to even say hi, Mage fans. Terry was one of the few people in my life that I spoke to almost every day. And the biggest thing I think he'd want us to take away is if you want something to happen, just do it. You want there to be a mage game? Run one. You want a supplement to exist? Write it. He was the epitome of just do it. He ran ungodly numbers of one-shots for people because he wanted more people to get to experience mage, and no one else was doing it, so he did it. It was either him or me who popped up anytime someone suggested anything as something that should exist to push it onto the Storyteller's Vault. He had so many plans for large series of podcasts to do to help teach people mage, because he just thought that the world would be better with more mage in it, and so he was going to do it. And I think the best way we can carry his memory forward is just remember to just do it. If there's something we want to see happen, go for it. Both in and out of mage. Don't hesitate. Don't wait for everything to be perfect. Don't hope that someone more qualified than you is going to come along and get around to it. Just do it. How about Puka next?
On the spot. Well, I'm going to echo what both of you have said, and I think what defined Terry for me was creating and connecting, just building community wherever he went and making things with energy that I don't think any 10 people had as much energy as Terry did for like putting things into the world. And that's very much something that I'm carrying forward as as we go through this year without him, which has been very difficult. But something in particular that I also wanted to call out was Terry, I think, was it was a big feather in his cap to get to write for Mage, for M20. And I know he was very proud of the material that he created. I would also say that his connection to the makers of that game, I mean, he had people on the podcast who he interviewed and he knew the writers and everything, but I think he really reminded them that there was this contingent of people who adored this weird little game called Mage. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the people responsible for keeping it alive had kind of maybe not written it off, but sort of thought, oh, we don't even know if this is popular. And Terry was there to remind them, yes, there's hundreds, thousands of people who are engaged, who are on the podcast Discord, who are reaching out, who remember it from the 90s and are still into it. And I think that's been very valuable to us as a community to have that reminder. So I don't really know how to carry that forward because I don't have the people on my email list or whatever, but I was always deeply appreciative of that aspect that he did. I, like Adam, learned so much about podcast recording from him. I was telling Josh before we started that one of the things, whenever I would record with Terry, like, I would be talking to the microphone and he would very gently just like reach out, grab my shoulder and push me towards the microphone. So, I try to have good microphone technique as a result, which doesn't always work, but hopefully my voice is coming through today. Something that I don't know how many listeners knew about him, whenever we would talk Changeling, Terry would say that he was a boggin, and he was one of the finest boggins I've ever met. Every time I came to his house, there would be some food item ready to present. The most memorable of which that I've mentioned before is the stuffing waffle, which I discovered at his house and has changed my life. But he just had this boundless generosity. And it was generosity not only of his time and his attention, but also of the things he could prepare. Or, sometimes I would come over and say, oh, I found this book that you might think is cool here. And just like hand me an art book about the Fae, And so that Terry inspires me to try and be more like Terry, and not many people do that. And all of those aspects are things which... It's a process. I mean, trying to bring all those things forward, trying to translate that into, okay, well, what can I do to help the Mage community? What can I do to help other gaming communities, or any communities? Because, I mean, Terry was part of so much more than just Mage. And it's hard. I'm not wired for that kind of activity, but I think the best way I can think of to remember him is to try my best and to emulate that. So, yeah, that's what I'm carrying forward, and we'll see how it goes. But I would like to now hand the microphone to Bryce.
Hi, Mage fans. Terry brought together a disparate group of fans and somehow tied them all together as a community. I wouldn't be here on this podcast this morning had he not reached out to me one day and said, hey, that's great. Do you want to talk about that on the show? We can record that. The podcast, the Discord, link is in the show notes. His infectious curiosity about the world around him, everything he did just built the gaming community and made it better. As for what we learned from Terry, so very, very, very much. Terry was one of the most knowledgeable people that I have ever met. And I have a lot of friends who were nerds. So that's saying something. And if he didn't know about something, he was excited to learn about it. Like Francis Bacon said, he took all knowledge to be his province. And I was always just super excited when I mentioned a fact that he was unaware of that I could elaborate on, because he was like a kid in a candy store. He wanted it all. And anytime that I had an idea, I could bring it to him and he would improve it. Even if that meant telling me, nah, man, that's a bad take, try again. His advice was always great, and it was always helpful each and every time. As for something about him that listeners might not know but would appreciate, I did mention this in the Discord. Terry and I were Snapchat friends because we live very, very, very far apart. And we'd send each other funny pictures of license plates or random stuff in our lives. He was always sending pictures of, him cooking or of building the aforementioned solar array on top of his house. But one thing that I always enjoyed seeing were what I referred to as his Disney princess snaps. Terry had befriended, somehow, the wild animals that lived near his home. He would regularly, like daily, send videos of himself feeding birds and squirrels and other wild animals straight out of his hands. How we're carrying his memory forward. In addition to trying to be the best version of myself, because I don't think I ever saw Terry as a version of himself aside from the best version, I'm doing what I can to bring my love of gaming to those around me. I've taken over storytelling, game mastering duties for my local gaming group, and trying to get them to run some World of Darkness games, but they are wildly opposed. But hey, we'll get there someday. And with that, I will hand it off to, I believe the last person is Josh.
So, for me, I really think that Terry's impact on the gaming community was much bigger than he could see on a regular basis. Terry often would ask, why aren't more people playing Mage, right? How do I get more people to play Mage? But also, how do I get more people to play games, right? That was a question he asked me regularly. How do we do this? How do we encourage people to try new things, to find cool stuff that they're interested in, engage in? And Terry was a font of making people want to do that new thing, right? To figure out a new game. Try at Con was just one example of him finding ways to encourage people to try something new, right? Play a new game. And that impact, it reverberates, because since his passing, people have come, from my opinion, out of the woodwork, out of nowhere, to be like, Terry encouraged me to do blah, blah, blah. I'm like, how did you even know Terry, right? Where did you come from? But he found a way to regularly empower and encourage people everywhere he went. And the ability to get people excited about even their own game, right? I saw him take a designer who was a little bit down about the success of their game and transform that into them being re-energized and walking away going, this is going to be the best game that I can make ever, right? And that sort of people empowerment is essential to good communities around the world. And that skill of Terry's is one that I think we all should try and cultivate in our hearts as much as possible. And it's not easy, right? Sometimes it's harder than it should be to feel that energy and to use it. And I learned so many different things from Terry. We had lots of conversations, of course, about podcasting and about microphones and about equipment. But I think the thing that I learned that I take away the most is it's okay to be critical of the things that you truly believe in, right? Because Terry was really good about asking follow-up questions. Not just why, not just tell me more about that, but insightful follow-up questions that made you really interrogate the thing you just said. Some things that I still believe that I've said to him, he interrogated with really good questions, and that's left me going, I should do this all the time. We should do this all the time. Use these questions with each other, not to challenge one another, not to hurt one another, but to encourage one another to get deeper into the weeds of whatever it is we're thinking about or feeling, and find ways to make sure that the best version of that thought and action comes out from those questions. And then something that listeners might not know, I think that Terry mentioned offhandedly several times that he was a Boy Scout, but that doesn't really encapsulate Terry's Boy Scoutness. We talk about paradigm a lot in Mage, and Boy Scout was Terry's paradigm. If you ask me, he can come back and yell at me if he would like to, if that's incorrect. But everything he did was really built around the Boy Scout ethos. the Boy Scout motto was something he not only could recite from memory, right, at any moment, but truly the reasons he did many things was because of that. It was because of that as his foundational moral system. And with that in mind, right, like the Boy Scouts are one of those things that I think many people today think are fairly quaint and a little antiquated and not something that is good for the world per se. And that may be me like projecting that onto other people. But seeing Terry's adherence to the Boy Scout way of being changed my entire opinion of that, right? It made me look at Boy Scouting and say, there is still incredible amounts of value in this, and healthy, positive things that we should encourage. So I'm not necessarily telling everyone to go and throw their kids into the Boy Scouts right now, but don't be afraid of groups like the Boy Scouts, right, that are saying, hey, we are small communities, we're local communities of people designed to get people to interact with each other, to work with one another, to build things together. We need more of that in our world today, and the Boy Scouts and Terry are just one example of that type of energy, of that type of love for the world. So the last question here is the way we're carrying Terry's memory forward. And I have to admit right now, this has been a struggle for me in that part of my memory of Terry is his ability to create good podcasts, right? To interview people. And for folks who know me, you know that I did Werewolf the podcast for a long time, and I really enjoyed doing those things, but my love for that game burnt out so badly that the actions of podcasting have become more difficult than they should be. So I have loads of ideas for Mage podcast ideas that I would like to do, and not enough time and mental clarity space to say, hey, this is the episode I'm going to do right now. This is the thing that I'm going to put out into the world. But my hope is to continue engaging with the Mage community to ensure that it grows and builds and becomes more than it is today. I think that Mage the Ascension is essential to the gaming, to the history of gaming, to the very DNA of role-playing games. And I think the more people that even once play the game, they gain something from it. They learn something they would not have learned from any other games. And Terry, I think, felt that more than anything, that he saw the potential for Mage to change the world. And I think that paradigmatic shift, and that is an intentional pun, is something that's positive and could only grow into something better. So those are my major thoughts. We've got a great group of people here at the table, and we don't per se have a next question, but I do want to open the floor really briefly and see, is there a thought that anyone's had while we were talking that you'd like to share or that you'd like to add at this point? And Puka can murder me later for any editing mess that this creates.
There will be no murders. I want to clarify that.
And not hearing anything, that is okay. But I do want to just say thank you to Adam and Bryce and Charles and Puka. I don't think this community would be what it is without the continued engagement from our hosts in making Mage the podcast a thing. Terry was good at building connections, right? Puka mentioned that about his ability to reach out to the designers of the game and other people who are interested in the game and encourage them, empower them, bring them into the community, not just to the side of it, but really like front and center, even momentarily. When there's a good idea, right? And we should look to take all those good ideas and make them reality. So,
and what could be more Mage than that?
Exactly. For Terry's memory, I hope that everyone thinks to themselves once a day, at least, for a little while, if I were a Mage, what would I do to change this thing in front of me? Because I think that Terry thought about that. What if I was a Mage and I could change this thing in front of me? So Bryce provided this bit for us to use here at the end that I think is fabulous. And it's, if the real ascension was the friends that we made along the way, then Terry has ascended further than most. Thank you, Mage fans.
Hey guys, this is Brian Grossman. I just wanted to give a shout out to you, to Terry Robinson, rest in peace, Adam, and all the guest stars. You guys have the best podcast around. For anybody who's a fan of the World of Darkness like myself, going on, almost 3 decades, you guys are must listen podcasts, I guess, to word it kind of strangely. You guys are amazing. And you are extremely entertaining. And for anybody who's a fan of White Wolf and the World of Darkness, you have to listen to the podcast. Rest in peace, Terry. I'm glad that the podcast is continuing on. And I'm a listener for life. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brian Johnson. I've previously appeared as a guest on Mage the Podcast, talking about real-world books of magic and language as a form of magic. I'd already been a fan of the show for years, so when one day out of the blue Terry showed up in my inbox asking if I'd like to talk about gamifying my research, I was equal parts flattered and confused. But as it turned out, collaborating with Terry on those episodes was one of the best experiences I've had in terms of presenting the topics I study to a general audience. And I do mean collaborating. As I think is apparent with all of the guests Terry has spoken to over the years, he went into our conversations with not only an enthusiastic curiosity and enough background research to ask interesting questions, but also the practiced creativity of a storyteller in spinning my info dumps into ideas that people could actually use in their games. I'll always regret that we never got to really hang out beyond those couple of hour-long Zoom calls. Terry was a friendly, respectful guy, and obviously one who loved all the ins and outs of Mage and the TTRPG hobby as much as anyone, along with having the intelligence and empathy to connect with a vast spectrum of people over it. I can only believe we are all richer for what he shared with us while he was here, and that perhaps the best memorial we can offer is to meet the people who come into our own lives with the same empathy and enthusiasm that Terry demonstrated.
I didn't know much about Mage the Podcast until Terry interviewed me about a pair of my books on the vault. However, over the course of an hour-and-a-half Zoom interview, Terry won me over with his charm, his warmth, his wit, and his sincere interest in his guests and their work. I've since gone back and listened to many past episodes, and it's clear to me that what I got was the genuine Terry. He was a delightful, intelligent, and kind-hearted man with a deep and abiding enthusiasm. And the world is a little bit colder for his departure. Rest in peace, Terry.
Hi, I'm Harry Heckel. I wrote for Mage of the Ascension, including work on Digital Web and Book of Worlds. I met Terry when he was interviewing me for Mage of the Podcast. And I don't know what I expected that day, but to my surprise, I was suddenly talking to someone who I'd never met, but who felt like a good friend. His energy, his love for Mage all came out in our conversation, both the parts that were on the air and off the air. And he had a gift for reminding me things about Mage. It was like I was talking to the grand curator of the museum of all things Mage. And he reminded me of so many things that I had done about my writing. He inspired me and encouraged me to do more. And it was like I left that interview with a renewed sense of inspiration. It was like I had found a light in the darkness. And I felt so ready to go and create afterwards. I wish I'd have a chance to have another conversation with Terry. I was looking forward to hopefully meeting him at a con in person and gaming with him or having dinner. He was special. And to his friends and family, I'm so sorry for your loss. To Terry, I just wanted to say thank you for the gift of that interview. You really helped remind me of the good that role-playing, Mage, that all of these things do in people's lives, and you will be missed.
Greetings, dear listeners. My name is Jakob Klünder from the World of Dark Ages podcast. I had the pleasure of being interviewed by Terry twice, and his passion for the games and the settings of the World of Darkness really shone through. He was a great interviewer, made me feel at ease as a guest, and taught me something about doing interviews in the process. He will be missed.
Hi, my name is Kim Godwin, and I am a freelance writer with Onyx Path, as well as a game developer. I knew Terry from doing interviews with him about Trinity Continuum Aether. I did a actual play of the first public version of Curseborn with him, where he played one of the dead, and I played one of the hungry. And we did an actual play of They Came from Cyclops' Cave, which apparently was his first fantasy game ever, and it wasn't his genre, and he played a grumpy sage, and I played the puppet glitter dragon thing with him, and those were really fun games. Terry was so wildly creative and could do so much so quickly on improv, and he was just a joy to talk to and interact with, and he just had so much energy and love for mage and role play. And I have the utmost sympathy for the people that knew him closest and best now that he's passed. And I think that it's great that the community has reached out, and they're with the maybe Ascension was the friendship we made all along or something, like, I forget that's what it actually says, but I thought that was touching, and donating it to the charity he cared a lot about, which was the Boy Scouts. It always sucks to lose people when they're so young, especially when they're younger than you, but I hope everyone remembers all of the wonderful things that Terry created and all the things, and they keep being happy about his involvement with the world and everything else. We miss him. I miss him. And I'm really happy I got to do that, the Capoloy interview that we were talking about doing before he passed, because I was waiting for the NDA to clear, and trying to do the thing that he would have enjoyed. It's hard to talk about it for so long and not get really emotional, but yeah, miss you, Terry. Glad we're doing stuff to keep your memory alive in the spirit of cooperation and storytelling and creativity.
I'm Chris from the Mega Dumbcast. I was on Mage the Podcast a few times. Didn't know Terry as well as some other people, as well as I would have liked, for sure. But in the few times that I was on Mage the Podcast, Terry definitely made a big impression. It was a little bit intimidating to come on the show because of how smart and insightful and prepared Terry always was. And partly also because he was so professional, for lack of a better word, and like he wasn't there to flex. So I knew that if I did say something stupid on the show, he wasn't going to kind of magnify it or try to score points. Terry always was there to make guests look good, to make the episode as good as it could be. I really loved being on the show. And as much as I wasn't a huge part of Mage the Podcast, the show had an outsized role in my life. I've talked in other forums about how a couple of times when I was on the show, it coincided with big events in my life. The first time I did mushrooms made me think of Mage the Ascension, which made me think of Terry. So that was a big experience for me that weirdly involved this guy from this podcast. So I guess, partly I'm here to speak for all the people for whom he was this guy from this podcast. Also the fact that, I had some things on the back burner. Like I had a project. I still have a document for it. Something I thought about approaching Terry with to collaborate on. I still have an email from him from way back where he was offering to guest on a side series that I stopped doing before he could be on it, but he was on the list. There's every possibility that if he were still with us, he would have been on my show within the next year, or that I would have approached him about this project. So yeah, I liked Terry a lot. I really respect his work. I'm always going to remember him because of these strange coincidences where, he just kind of like happened to be there to the very limited extent that he was present in my life. He happened to be there at these big moments without really knowing it. And, it's a bit of a cliche, but we don't call them cliches in Mage. We call them mythic threads. A mythic thread for you. Maybe reach out to people. Maybe answer your emails. Because I regret not working more with Terry.
Matthew Dawkins here from Onyx Path Publishing. Terry and I spoke about the World of Darkness quite a lot and in some detail, and while I had Vampire and Wraith as my major touchstones, I suppose, Terry's was of course Mage the Ascension. And I think the thing that always struck me when speaking with Terry was not only how courteous he was, how eloquent, how open to ideas he was. It was his curiosity, which was absolutely boundless and completely appropriate for Mage the Ascension, which I think often when people think of Mage, they think of these high concepts and complex ideas that go into the game, which is part of what makes it fantastic, but I think what makes it so magical is curiosity, and the curiosity of the players and the storytellers, and nobody summed that up better than Terry Robinson, in my opinion. I think he was endlessly curious and therefore always fun and interesting to speak to. I do miss that. And yeah, I just wanted to pay this very brief tribute to him.
Terry was one of the most positive, welcoming, and bright voices in the World of Darkness community that I ever encountered. He was an amazing soul. He was a great friend. And his enthusiasm was as infectious as it came. And I still miss him. I still think of him. And I think that his impression on our hobby is going to last a lot longer than just his life. And I think it's so rare to find somebody who loves something and knows something so completely in this world, and he was an absolute treasure.
Terry Robinson tribute from Satyros Brucato. Terry Robinson made things happen. Mage is about people who change the world, whose beliefs and intentions and actions change reality for not just for themselves, but for the people around them. And that's the kind of person Terry was. He always used to say, a scout is helpful. Well, Terry was more than a scout, and he was certainly more than helpful. Terry was a charismatic agent of change. He was, a wave of personality. Anytime that he spoke, anytime that he walked into a room, you could feel that. He was a force of transformation. And one of the many things that I loved and admired about him and appreciated about him most is that he never lorded over people with that power, with that ability to change things and transform people too. Instead, he always, humble is kind of the wrong word because that implies someone who is dismissing who they are. And Terry was always very sure of who he was in my experience of him, but that he didn't use that to lord over people. He used it to help people. And the world needs more people like him. I'm glad that he, on the podcast and the page, that Terry was able to leave so much a part of himself in Mage and to transform Mage and the people who are familiar with Mage in the ways that he has, because Terry just had so much to offer and so much to provide awareness for in this world. And so many people, I think, have been changed thanks to his words and thanks to his actions. I know I have. He often used to joke that when we were recording, Terry used to joke that we disagree about almost everything, and that's just theatrics. In reality, the reality that he and to a degree that he and I made when we were talking together, in reality, we agreed on almost everything, and certainly about the important things. And I wish we all had more time, but I'm glad we had the time that we did. God damn, I miss him. I'm glad we had the time that we had. And there's never enough of it. Thank you, brother, for all you were, for all you are, for all you did. Rest easy, Terry. You weren't just a scout. You really were a mage.
Terry was an inspiration, often speaking of the power of community and improving the world for others. He dedicated so much of his life to creating the tools and knowledge to help all of us play, for which we're eternally grateful. Whilst it hurts to know we won't hear a new, "Hi, Mage fans!" Thanks for the drive to go out and change reality, Terry. Best wishes to Julia and all the family, all the way from Australia. Stefan.
Hi there. My name is Joseph Aleo. I had the great honor of founding Mage the podcast, and even more than that, I had the great privilege of knowing Terry Robinson. Let me tell you how we met. It was about 7 years ago now. I'd just gotten into this beautiful, wild, thoughtful game called Mage the Ascension, and I was curious, excited, hungry to learn everything I could. So I did what I usually do when I get fixated on something. I went digging. Podcast, YouTube, anything I could find. And you know what? There wasn't much out there. Not a lot of folks talking about Mage. So I figured, heck, maybe I'll start the thing I wish existed. Maybe I'll learn while sharing the journey. And that's how Mage the podcast came to be. Now, I knew I needed help. So I put out a little call on Facebook looking for a co-host who's been around the block with Mage. And lo and behold, I got lucky. I met Adam Simpson. Smart, kind, knew the game inside and out. Not long after that, I got a message from a fella named Terry Robinson. He said he wanted to help with the show. Well, I figured why not? Many hands make light work, right? What I didn't know back then was that Terry wasn't just offering to help. He was about to become the heart of that show. Right off the bat, Terry and Adam clicked. They had this rhythm, this rapport, like old jazz musicians who knew when to solo and when to let the other shine. And I'll tell you what, I finally had the podcast I always wanted to listen to. So I stepped back and let them run the thing while I handled the behind-the-scenes stuff. Now, I never got to meet Terry in person. That's one of those little heartbreaks that life sometimes hands you. But I heard his voice every weekend. We'd talk on the phone from time to time, just catching up, and through those conversations, through his words, his laughter, his kindness, I got to know the measure of the man. Terry was smart as a whip, charming as all get out, and funny in that way where you'd laugh even if you didn't quite catch the joke. But more than that, Terry had a good heart. He gave his time to the Boy Scouts. He volunteered with the opera in Philadelphia. He cared about his community, about people, about doing things right. And boy, was he dedicated. Rain or shine, week after week, month after month, Terry and Adam would put out another episode of the show. Every now and then, I'd tell him, Terry, you don't have to do it every single week. Slow down, rest. And he'd say something like, yeah, I'll think about it. But sure enough, the next week, there'd be a new episode, like clockwork. Toward the end, the episodes came less often. I could tell something was wrong. I called to check in, and he said he'd get the next show out when he could. And I told him, gently but firmly, I didn't care about the show. I cared about him. I told him to rest, to take care of himself. And still, he released one more. That was Terry. When our mutual friend Josh Heath called to tell me that Terry had passed, well, it felt like the air had been knocked clean out of me. He was too young, too full of life. He'd just gotten married to Julia, and I remember thinking, no, that can't be right. Not Terry. In the months after, we released the last few episodes Terry had worked on, and hearing his voice again, his laugh, just for a little while, it felt like he was still here, just on the other end of the mic. And maybe in a way, he still is. Because Terry touched people, quietly, warmly, with his words and his time and his decency. I didn't get to shake his hand or sit across from him at a table, but I knew him. And I'm grateful for that, deeply grateful. Terry, I miss you. We all do. Someday, I like to think we'll sit across that table, maybe roll some dice, maybe just talk. But until then, I carry you with me. Now, before we go, I want to read you some of the kind words folks sent our way after Terry passed. Because, like I said, he touched a lot of lives, and it's only right we remember him that way. Jonathan Fee from Jackalope Live Action Studio wrote, I had the pleasure of meeting Terry Robinson in person and playing his foil at his first ever LARP. It wasn't my first time hearing his name, but it was one of the handful of times in my life that I've gotten to not only meet someone whose work I'm a huge fan of, but actually play in a game set in a world we both love together. I remember meeting him and Shay Anderson for lunch ahead of the game. We were all supposed to be tightly connected in character, and we wanted to make Terry's first LARP experience a good one. I remember how nervous but excited I was on the Uber ride to the cafe because I was going to meet someone whose work I followed for quite some time at that point. I remember how sweet and humble he was when I asked if he'd indulge me in a moment of being a fanboy over getting to meet one of the folks behind one of my favorite podcasts. I remember how kind and caring he was in asking me about how my husband, Adrian, was doing since Mage Noir was taking place literally days after his liver transplant. I was only there because Adrian had insisted I go. Terry had paid attention to what was going on in my life, and even though it was his first LARP and he was a bit nervous, he wanted to know what he could do for me to make sure I had a good time. I remember that Terry asked me if I was a hugger, and when I said yes, he gave me a big hug. It made me feel like I'd known him forever. We had such a wonderful time talking, planning, and connecting on a personal level that I ended up being on crunch time, getting into costume and makeup for the LARP. We maintained that friendship afterward, and I always loved seeing his post and hearing his voice on his podcast, knowing that the man behind it was a sweet, kind, humble, and just amazing human being. I don't fully have the words for how much of a shock the news of his passing is. I heard about it last night from Matthew Webb, and I had to lie down because I couldn't really process it as true at first. I feel like not only our community, but the world in general has lost a little bit more of its light. Terry was a good man who wanted to share his passion and joy with the world, and I think that's important, that being able to share your joy and, in turn, uplift the spirits and voices of others is true magic. Leonardo Rezeda wrote, The Mage podcast has a special place in my heart. I remember listening to the first episode after searching for mage-related content on Google Podcasts. English is not my first language, and in Brazil, we do not have direct access to Mage the Ascension media. Your podcast made me feel again that purple, deep magic that I felt when I first read an old second edition PDF in my high school days. The feeling of, hey, somebody else is also nerding out about this. I am forever thankful for this connection. Terry will be deeply missed. My sentiments and condolences to his family and friends. MJ wrote, Just wanted to offer my sympathies for the loss of Terry. I feel getting the illusion that you know someone from online content is very common, but Terry's voice is one that I always look forward to revisiting, and I looked forward to each new podcast which featured him. Everything I know of Terry, albeit entirely secondhand, indicates he was a fantastic person and a very accomplished human being. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to hear his thoughts and listen in on some of his conversations. Panos Skordas wrote, "I was so sorry to hear of Terry's passing. From the things he said in Mage the Podcast, I'm sure he was a great man. My condolences." Sebastian Yūe wrote, "I met Terry only once when I was a guest on Mage the Podcast. In that short time we spent together, he asked well-researched and thoughtful questions, encouraging a lively discussion. He was one of the kindest hosts I've had the pleasure of sharing airtime with, and I'm honored to have had the chance to chat with him." Justin Achilli wrote, "Terry was a wonderful voice in the community, someone who always welcomed new enthusiasts into the hobby. He strove to genuinely understand the world of darkness and parse the mysteries of the strange magics of Mage, beyond lists of facts and dates among its secret history." Lauren Roy wrote, "Last summer, Terry reached out to say he was going to be traveling to Boston and wondered if I'd be available to record an in-person episode to talk about The Hedge for Changeling, The Lost. It was early June, and he came to my house in the evening. My husband fired up the grill, and the three of us sat talking about games for a long time before we realized we really ought to get to the interview. Mage the Ascension is the game of my heart, and even though I talked with and been interviewed by Terry before, I was nervous that I'd say something foolish or get rambling and make him feel like he had wasted his time and the podcast fans' time. But of course, those fears were unfounded. Terry set me at ease right away, and for the next hour, we sat in my backyard and talked about the cool things in The Hedge and how to use them in the World of Darkness Mage games. This won't be a surprise to anyone, but before long, I felt like I was talking to an old friend about a game we both love so dearly. We recorded long after dark, lit by his laptop screen. Before we left, we talked about getting together sometime in the future to hang out and play games, should we travel down his way or he came up north next. I wish we had a chance to make that happen, but I'm glad he reached out. I'm glad he came by. Every time I think about that night, as simple as it was, a perfect summer evening, good food, talking, and laughing with someone I considered not only a colleague, but now a newfound friend, I smile. Thank you, Terry. You're sorely missed. Thank you all for sharing your messages and your stories. Truly, those stories, those messages, they mean the world. Each one is a thread in the tapestry of Terry's life. And what a life it was. So to everyone who wrote in, who sent their stories and their love, thank you from the bottom of my heart. You help remind us that Terry isn't just someone we lost. He's someone we carry. We miss him. We'll keep missing him. But as long as we keep telling these stories, he's never truly gone. Rest easy, Terry. We'll see you on the other side. And until then, we'll keep the lamp lit.